So this is actually really common because my shop has a 60-gallon air compressor that feeds into it. However, my husband's shop is the attached garage, which is roughly 30 feet away. So whenever he needs air, he takes my hose reel and attaches a hose extension. And it's a little bit inconvenient for me because it not only occupies my hose reel, but it also runs it through the middle of my shop. So today, I'm gonna go ahead and make a small trench so that I could bury a compressed air line to get air to his shop while avoiding all of this. So the first thing I did was call somebody to come out and locate all of my utilities so I don't run the risk of running into them. Once all of the utilities were marked, I could then set out my new path from my shop to Cody's shop to lay the new line. So I made this portion next to the building a little bit deeper than what I planned for the rest of the line because the Suite 90 is going to be right next to the building. And what I want to be able to do is put the Suite 90 deep enough in the trench so that the straight portion is coming out of the ground rather than this set up a little bit higher and the curved portion be exposed. For the majority of the line, other than that entry point and the very end, I dug down to about 7 inches or so. And I only made it as wide as the sharpshooter shovel. That's kind of hard to say. Now, it just so happens that my father-in-law specializes in underground utilities, so he was able to give me some great pointers on digging a trench properly. His advice was to have the sharpshooter not vertical up and down, but a little bit leaning back towards me, then to use my body weight to stomp it in the ground slightly, pull the handle of the shovel back towards me to break up the ground, and then repeat until I'm at the depth that I want. Overall, this portion of the project went very quickly. Now, granted, the ground is very soft, so it didn't take much effort to get into it. Now, whenever I got close to where I knew a utility was coming in, that cable line especially, because I figured it would be shallow, I made sure to take my time because I did not want to run the risk of accidentally cutting it with my sharpshooter. With the entire trench now dug, I moved on to setting my conduit. Now, I know that the PEX airline that I'm going with is actually rated to be direct buried. However, I decided to run a sleeve of conduit just in case something ever happens to the line and it needs to be replaced. After gluing on that first Suite 90, then I put it into the ground with a small vertical extension piece just to keep dirt from getting inside of the pipe while I buried this side. I then moved on and started gluing on the other joints. When it came time to glue on the final joint, I ran it under that shallow cable line, glued on my Suite 90 that will be on the very end, and then stuck that in place first. I used a shovel to keep this in place where I wanted it, which is up against the house, while I refilled that portion of the ditch. With the conduit all connected, I could rake all of the dirt back in and refill the trench. Now, I may be completely off base, but is it possible that river dancing started by filling in trenches? Either way, I did my river dance and then came back with a hard rake to make it nice and neat. Okay, when it came time to actually going into the shop, I played around with several different methods, and I decided on going with 245s with a coupling joining the two. And to start off, I first cut down and then glued on that vertical piece of conduit coming up from the ground. Then I used a hole saw the same size as the conduit to drill in 2 holes, so that I could then come back with my speed square and jigsaw to make a connecting cut. And this was the only downside with going with 245s, is that you don't have a straight shot. So I drilled the outside hole first, then I repeated the steps on the inside, and I ended up having to expand my cut slightly in order to make this 45 fit. But it was definitely worth the effort because using the 245s made the entry and exit point come out so close to the building. It kept it all looking nice and clean. With the conduit squared away, I then started tying into my existing air line. And I simply did this by running the line along the top of my shop. I was originally concerned with only going with 1/2-inch tubing. However, Cody's already been using a 1/2-inch line to run from my shop to his, and he hasn't had any problems running any of his tools off with them. There's about a $100 cost difference between 1/2-inch and 3/4-inch lines, so I went ahead and stuck with 1/2-inch. While I was at it, I went ahead and installed a ball valve so I can kill the entire line if needed, or if I just want to be mean. All right, and then I moved on to running the tubing through the conduit. This was relatively easy. However, I did go ahead and spray some WD-40 on both the entry and exit of the conduit to make it a little bit easier. Once it popped out the end, I pulled up enough tubing to go all of the way up to the attic. I decided to go into the attic because I did not want to dig under the concrete footer that is under our fence, and I also did not want to go along the house where it would be seen from the road. So I used my hole saw to drill an entry point into the attic and then was careful not to kink the hose as I was placing that last joint of conduit in. The last finishing touches around here were to anchor it to the wall, put a bead of silicone around the top, and then also cut to size and finish connecting the tubing on the inside of the shop. Now, something I forgot to do that I will have to come back and do is put a drain valve on the line as soon as it comes up out of the ground, because that is going to be the lowest point of the entire line, so water will collect. Since the tubing is already in the attic, I decided to take Cody's hose reel and mount it in the attic as well, so that he can still use it, but it's completely out of the way. To do this, I removed the roller plate and then used that as a template to trace on the ceiling so that I can cut an access hole. Then the hose reel can be mounted in the attic and then have the tubing just ran directly over to it. Cool. So overall, this is a very quick and easy project, and I think Cody's going to be able to get tons of use having his own arrow hookup, and it gives me back my hose reel. So I hope that you enjoyed the project, and I will see you on whatever I'm working on next.